I think it maybe played a part in that.
Source out of date. Now, that's a big warning sign because source lost for so long. If you got one that's out of date, you're in trouble, basically.
Yeah. So
What sauce was it?
Sweet and sour.
Okay, so it's hard to tell if it's off or on, really.
That's right, yeah.
There's no taste indicators, is there?
It just came on so quick as well. It was really weird because 1 minute I was fine. The next minute, I could not stop being sick no matter how much I tried.
Oh.
It was just horrendous.
It's horrible, and I haven't, touch wood, pardon the superstition, I haven't been that sick for about 10 years, I think.
Yeah,
A good decade. A good decade. And every year I'm like, is it going to be this year? Is it going to be this year that I get the big thing? And no, and I've worked in healthcare for 12 years as well.
Wow.
And at the beginning of working in healthcare, got every flu, every bug, every sickness, every single thing that came around. And I just think those first 3 or 4 years was just me getting immunity to everything that was out there.
Yeah.
So we used to have a joke in our clinic because it was like a really busy clinic and it was a private clinic. So there were no barriers or anything. Almost like walking into a hotel lobby, that kind of thing in London, And we were just basically joking and we were testing out illnesses for the general population, to let you know what was coming up, basically.
Yeah.
We just got sick all the time. And the owners didn't care. They didn't want to take away that personal touch.
Yeah.
But fortunately, it means I don't ordinarily get very sick, just man flu, which is not really real, is it? It's just,
Right.
Yeah, according to my wife. Anyway, it's not real. Yeah. And every other one out there. I wanted to talk to you anyway because 401 files, and we're all a small community here in the UK.
Yeah.
We're looking, and I know you look for more than just Bigfoot, but looking for the kind of things that we look for. It's not like the US. There's not like a couple of thousand of us. There's 10 or 15 or however many, especially in Bigfoot. There's not a lot of people. And I wanted to get your take on what you think the subject is, why it drew you in the first place, and where you stand with it today. So, just give us a little bit of background. How did you get dragged into the British Bigfoot craze, and how is it detrimentally ruined your entire life?
So, for me, I came in very different to most people. My interest never started off with cryptids or extraterrestrials, UFOs. It started off with the paranormal, growing up in a house that was very active with poltergeist activity. And I think from a very young age, that opened my mind to the possibilities of other things. If ghosts can exist and the adults at the time didn't have the answers to what was going on, what else is out there that we don't know anything about? And around about the age of 10 or 11, I had an experience that I would say was more extraterrestrial in nature. And that completely just blew the doors wide open for me after that point. I started to have a big interest in things like the paranormal and things like UFOs and extraterrestrials. And it was in doing the research into these things that I realized there was such a thing called the UK Bigfoot. Before that, I never even heard of anyone talking about such a thing. And that just completely intrigued me that, I've lived in the UK my whole life. I'd never heard anything about this. And then the minute I started to research, I realized that there was a full community of people getting out there talking on a daily basis about this. So, with that's kind of how I got into it. Do you want me to talk about the earlier experiences as well in the house and things like that?
I mean, just completely freeform. It's very interesting to know what the issue was in the house that got you into it, and then the mind opening experience at 11 or 12 that's extraterrestrial, because my mind is already like, oh my gosh, she's been abducted, check for chips and little plants behind the ear and things like that, right? Yeah.
So when I grew up in this house, it was a normal house my mum and dad, working class family. I had an older sister and an older brother, and our house was on a council estate. And there was nothing really untoward about the house. It was a really nice house. We had a really good upbringing as children, and from a very early age, I could tell that the adults were talking about things, and I kept catching people out in mid conversation, but still too young to understand really what was being said or what the fuss was all about. And then around about 4 or 5 years old, maybe a bit younger, I had an experience, and even with my young mind at that time, I knew that this wasn't right. This felt off. It was different. And my mum had gone into the bathroom. She was getting into the bath, and she basically said to me, "Look, Ben, I'll be locking the bathroom door because it's kicking out time from school. Your brother and sister might come running in, not know that I'm in the bath and running on me. So I'll be locking the door. Do you want to sit downstairs and play with, watch the TV, or do you want to come upstairs and play with your toys?" And I made a decision that I would sit downstairs and watch the TV. And while I'm doing that, like any 4 or 5 year old boy at the time, really short attention span, I decided actually I will go upstairs. I'll go upstairs and play with the toys. So I jumped off the sofa and I sat down in front of the TV and switched it off. Now, this was one of the old school TVs that used to fizzle out with the black and white static before it would go to a solid black. And so I'm kneeling in front of the TV and I'm watching this static appear on the screen. And as it fizzled out, there was still something there in the reflection, shimmering. And it confused me, it baffled me at the time. And I was thinking, oh, well, maybe I've not turned the TV off properly, which is silly now looking back. But, as a young child, that's the kind of thought process that you go down. So I turned it on and turned it back off. And sure enough, over my left shoulder in the reflection of this TV, stood roughly about where the door was behind me. There was still something in the reflection. So I thought, what the hell is this? And the only way I can describe what I was looking at was, it was like a heat wave on a really warm day when you look down the road and you see that shimmer of heat.
Oh, yeah.
But it was stood vertical, and it had like the cookie cutter shape of a human, the head, the shoulders. I didn't see any legs. This thing kind of stopped roughly just a bit before where the floor was. And I never at any point decided to look directly at the door. Instead, what I did was just keep looking at this thing through the reflection. And as I did that, I stood up and I carried on. I started to walk back towards the sofa, always keeping eye contact through the reflection. So if you imagine I'm looking at the TV off to my right, say 1 o'clock, where this thing is in actual space and time is off to like, say, 11 o'clock. And I'm watching it in the reflection, I'm sat there, and this thing really does now start to shimmer quite violently. And it also appeared to be growing in size. And for whatever reason, whether I believed it was getting closer to me or just curiosity, I quickly turned my head to have a look over at the living room door. And this thing, whatever it was, glided at such a speed right up into my face and sent me into a complete panic mode. I scrambled up the back of the sofa, I kicked all the cushions off. I remember trying to scream for my mum, and at the time nothing would come out. There was no audible sound there whatsoever. And I panicked. I jumped over the side of over the arm of the sofa, ran to the door where this thing had just been stood, and then up the stairs to my mum. And you can imagine as well, like my mum at this point, listening to a small child saying that something just glided across the floor up into my face. She was very, very concerned, and no doubt by this point as well, she'd already experienced a few things, or experiencing things at the time. So it was very concerning for her that I'd seen this. But that was my first ever experience. After that, everybody seemed to have an experience. My dad would tell stories of when he'd come home late from work. Friends of the family who would dog sit for us while we were away on family holidays. They would call up and say, "I can't do this anymore. Like, you're going to have to get the next door neighbour to come get the key off me and take over because I'm going home. I'm not coming back."
Oh, wow.
It was that bad. Things really did get out of hand, and eventually, over time, this thing did start to speak as well. It gained a voice and started to talk.
To you or everyone?
No, to my dad. So the story is that my dad was a long-distance lorry driver, and he would work very, very long hours. So usually when my dad gets home, everybody's in bed because he's home at like 3 or 4 in the morning. And he'd always have a routine. He could never just work on the road for 12 hours, 18 hours or whatever it was, and then come home and jump straight into bed. His body would be still in overdrive. So what he'd do, come home, put the kettle on for himself, and maybe watch a bit of TV or something before climbing into bed. And he said that this night was no different. He came home, it was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, put the kettle on, he bent down in the fridge, everyone was asleep. He bent down in the fridge to get the milk, and over his right shoulder into his ear, he heard a female's voice say, "Gary." Now, Gary is actually my dad's name. So, all the hairs on the back of his neck stood straight up on end, and he was frozen in the spot where he was, just bent down in the fridge. And he said that it was that realistic, this voice, that he almost turned around and said, "Yeah," thinking it was my mum.
Mm.
But sure enough, there was no one there. And my dad's mother had passed away only a few weeks before this happened. So my initial go-to was, "Well, was it your mum?" And he said, "Absolutely not. It wasn't my mum. It's not a voice that I've ever heard before. It wasn't someone I'm familiar with, but it was definitely a female's voice, and whoever it was knew who I was." And this played with my dad for a very, very long time. And my dad is really, he's straight as a die. If he doesn't see it, he doesn't believe it. And he always thinks logically about everything. But the fact that this thing knew his name really did play with his head for a very long time, because it just leads to so many more questions. Like, it's something that I can't see is sharing the same space and time as me, knows who I am. Is this someone is this someone that I once lived on this planet with, and they passed away and they're watching me? Is it someone that I've never met before but lives in a different dimension? There's just so many questions that come from that, and that really did mess my dad up quite a bit.
Did the house have some kind of a history? Sometimes you hear of things like that, tragic events, etc. That whole backstory.
Yeah.
A lot of places have. Was the house old?
No, not relatively speaking. The house wasn't any older than any of the other surrounding buildings. But what this house did is, I'll tell you a bit about this. So my next door neighbours were a really elderly couple at the time, and so they'd known the people that lived in the house before us. And there was an elderly woman in the house before us called Mrs. Bates, and she was a religious woman who would often be visited by the priest. They'd sit in the front living room and they'd read sermons from the Bible. Well, Mrs. Bates died at the bottom of the stairs. While her son was away on holiday, he was her carer. She could still potter about, she could still do her own thing. He wasn't immobile or anything, but she had an accident on the stairs and fell, and she wasn't found for some time after, when her son got back off holiday at the bottom of the stairs. So that is one person that we know definitely died in the house. And a few years before that event, the priest had also choked to death in the front living room, which is a very
In her living room.
Yeah, in Mrs.
Oh,
Bates'
wow.
living room. Yeah, he choked in the front living room and died. Yeah, and the weird thing is when I mentioned those two people to you, like a little old lady and a man of the cloth, you wouldn't expect, this to be a scary kind of haunting, but and so I can never make sense of that. Some of these experiences that we had were terrifying, and it's just not. It doesn't seem right to think that it could have been those two people. So we do suspect as well that there might have been more people that died in the house.
Did you feel that the attacks were that just the unusual aspect of the interactions was what was terrifying, or were they very intentionally malevolent and out to scare you? What was your feeling about that?
Yeah, this whatever was causing the issues within the house was definitely malevolent. This was a being that was out to scare and play tricks and cause foolery, because even down to the silliest of things, like things would go missing and we'd all chip in and we'd all be trying to find this whatever it was, this item, and it would be in the most obvious place, a place that you've usually checked 10 times before, like still in the middle of the living room. And it was almost as if it was just to say, I can beat you, I'm playing games with you, kind of thing. And again, mentioning, like, whispering people's names in their ears and little things like that. But yeah, it didn't ever seem like a friendly spirit. Like the bangs and the noises that would come from the house were horrendous. There wasn't like, there was
Did
never
things
no.
move? I mean, visually in front of you, like flowers
Oh
on the
yeah,
shelf and all the
happened a
classic
lot.
poltergeist. It's
Yeah, and I'll give you one example of that. So when I was around about the age of 14, 15 now, in my bedroom, there was a shelf just off to my right where my bed was, and it had all my deodorant cans, all my smellies and things on there. And this is when the first PlayStation 1 came out, and I've been playing up on the PlayStation for quite some time. And I saw a deodorant can in my peripheral vision just slide from one end of the shelf back. And I paused the game, I quickly looked, but nothing had moved, and I couldn't see anything moving on the shelf. So I thought at this point, well, I've been playing the computer a while, maybe, you know, I'm playing tricks. So I pressed play, and I carried on playing the PlayStation. And I saw it happen again, really, really quickly. But, you know, like this time now, I'm thinking, I know I saw that. Like, the first time, I'm you know, trying to convince myself that I'm tired. But the second time, I know I saw that move. So what I did was I took like a mental note and I thought, right, okay, that's the can that's moved. I know it's roughly like in line with that Lynx can, and you know, to the right of it, it's in line with the writing and the letter in there. If it moves again, I'll know. So I pressed play and I carried on playing the computer. This time, the can that in question almost looked as if someone had just tapped the top of the can and it was wobbling back and forth, ready to tip over. So I thought, right, okay, that's definitely moving now. I can see this in the corner of my eye. I'm actually watching this in the corner of my eye. This is moving. So I paused the computer and I thought it'd be like, for some strange reason, I thought it would be like the movies. You know, when you quickly turn and look and it stops. It didn't. It carried on moving. And there was this moment of, crap, like, what is happening? You're supposed to have stopped moving. So I'm watching this can rocking back and forth on the shelf and I'm trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And I'm sat there puzzled looking at this, and all of a sudden, just as it looked as if it was about to tipple over completely, it shot off at an angle and hit me on the side of the face. In complete hysterics, I jumped off the bed, I got wrapped in all the controller wires, pulled the computer off the side, and ran to the my mum and dad obviously downstairs thinking, what the hell is going on? There's all this banging up there.
Yeah.
Little things like that, you know, stick with me
Classic
forever.
genuine fear response.
Yeah.
Can't be argued with. Nobody's
That's-
faking that. Getting wrapped up in the wires.
The whole computer.
Running down the stairs with a PlayStation trailing behind you.
Yeah. Completely wrapped in wires. I pulled it all off the side. I just didn't care at that point. All I wanted to do was get to the bottom of the stairs to the living room door where my parents were.
It sounds terrifying. You know, it's strange with these old houses sometimes. I don't really have maybe I do have a strong opinion on what these things may be sometimes, but it's not an area that I investigate. So because of that, I'm sort of out of the loop, so to speak. But we grew up in a very old house. I think it was built in the early 1800s. Again, you know, sort of like terrace streets, but the build really, really old. And when we're in now is from 1866, and this one was much older than that then, you know. And yeah, you know, all the similar things, you know, cup flying off the shelf and hitting you in the head, or little growls behind you, or a black shape running past the whole window. It was kind of like that bathroom glass, you know, that what do they call that type of glass?
Is it fluffy glass?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't remember that name. Or, you know, even standing in a doorway when you sort of half open your eyes, you know, at night or in the morning, all this kind of weird stuff anyway. Then completely stopped the moment we left the house. You know, never experienced it anywhere else again.
Yeah. Well, this is a question that I get asked quite a lot because obviously, I mean, that's just you know, that's only scratching the surface of what happened. If you think about this, I lived in that house for 18 years of my life before I eventually left to join the army. And a lot of people will always say to me, well, why did you stay there for so long if all this was going on? And what you've got to remember is that, you know, my mum and dad had 3 children at the time.
Don't just move out.
Yeah, their first house that they bought together. They were probably in high demand at the time. And it wasn't like the activity was non-stop every day. You know, for 6 months, we might have nothing happen at all. And then all of a sudden, we'd have 3 weeks of just hell where things are flying off the wall and there's been noises heard and, you know, and it would go on and on and on like this. And I think it was those lull periods where nothing happened that we almost convinced ourselves that we got used to it. Oh, you know, nothing's happening now; it's calming down, and that's why we stayed there for so long. But yeah, that seems to puzzle people a lot as to why we
kind of acclimatized to most things. Actually,
that's right.
You really can, and yeah, you know, you get like a thick skin to certain things. That makes perfect sense to me. So there's that, but then there's an extraterrestrial experience at age, you say, between 11 and 12. That really sort of blew your socks off. So if that sounds pretty blow your socks off material anyway, what happened to you when you were between 11 and 12?
Yeah, so this has actually been in the papers, so people listening to this might be familiar with this because it recently went worldwide. And as papers do, they twisted the story quite a bit. So it'll be nice for me to just put this straight. But when I was 11 or 12 years old, I was in the Cub Scouts, a very keen outdoorsy type child. Bushcraft was my area of expertise. And there was a place where we used to go for weekend camps, and it was called Snowball Plantation. This was a Cub Scout place where we'd go for the weekend, we'd set up tents, and like I said, practice bushcraft. I used to love going there, brilliant. And the camp went smoothly, there was nothing untoward there whatsoever. But it was on the way back that, my life changed forever. And we was on a minibus heading home, and the Cub Scout leader at the time was stood up in the middle of the bus. Now you've got to remember, this is 1997, so this is 20-something years ago for me. And yeah, she stood up in the middle of the bus and she said, "We're going to be doing a random stop, basically." It was a random stop, a P stop for anyone that wants to jump off, and then we'll quickly get back on the bus and hit the road again. Me and my friend decided to jump off the bus and stand at the side of the road, taking a peek. Being quite a shy child, I didn't want to stand shoulder to shoulder with my friend doing that, but there was a little embankment in front of us. It was only about a bit taller than maybe shoulder height for us at the time. From the road, you couldn't see up the embankment into the woods at the top. But once you were up there on top of the embankment, you're still in visible sight of the adults, and then you would have full view of what's in the woods. So I ran up this little embankment, and I'm stood there now looking into these woods. And as I'm looking through the woods, I saw this little outbuilding. It was a brick building, clearly derelict, clearly not in use anymore. There was bricks missing, ivy growing all over it. And it was just a really weird thing to see, because I was thinking, well, where's the rest of this building? Like, why is this random little brick building in the middle of this woods no longer used? Like, to me, in my mind at the time, it looked like it was probably used for storing tools or something like that. So as I'm looking further through the woods, trying to find the rest of this broken up building, I noticed something move off to my left. And what I saw, clear as day, this was only, maybe less than 20 meters away. It wasn't a dense forest, so I had a really good look at this thing. It was a green creature. Now, I call it creature and not reptilian because I don't know what the hell this thing was. I can only describe what I saw. It was green from head to toe. The color green was olive. It had a very small head with black eyes. The arms came past the knees, and it walked with a stoop, leant forward as it walked. Now, I'm not sure if it walked that way because it was so tall and dangly, or if it was trying to keep a low profile as it walked through the woods. I'm really not sure. But we had this moment where, I looked up, I saw this thing, and it looked over at me and it saw me. It didn't seem phased whatsoever. It was almost like it knew that I wouldn't run back down the embankment, screaming, "Alien, alien." It just kind of so blasé about walking through these woods and me seeing it. And it carried on walking in that direction. Now, my initial thought at that time, stood at the top of that embankment, was, okay, this is a practical joke. This is a trick. And so what I thought, I made up a little thing in my head really quickly on the spot right there and then, and I thought, I know what I'll do. I won't mention that I've seen it. And then all their time and all their effort that they've gone through to put this in front of me will be because I haven't even seen what they've tried to trick me with. I turned back around, went down the embankment and climbed on the bus. And I waited for someone to say, "We got you. You were so scared. You should have seen your face." Nobody said anything about this green creature walking through the woods. And, the conversations were all normal about the camp and what they're doing when they get home. And
wow.
That completely baffled me. And the weird thing about this whole story is that I forgot completely about this whole experience for many, many years until I was about mid to late 20s, and I was at work one day. There was nothing in front of me to bring back this memory. I wasn't reading a book on aliens. I wasn't even watching documentaries or anything like that at this time. I was just at work in a car park. I worked as a parking host at the time in a multi-story car park. And like a bolt of lightning, this all came back to me. The emotions and everything, the memory, it was so vivid that it physically shook me. Like, I felt emotions. I felt scared, almost sad, confused, and
relived the moment, the trauma of the moment.
absolutely. And what was scary to me is I didn't know where these emotions were coming from or where this memory had popped out from, but it was there, and I remember absolutely every small detail. I remember it was a really, really warm day. I remember that there was white flowers coming up through the forest floor, and I remember stood at that on the top of that embankment, thinking how strange this creature's legs looked as it brushed through these white flowers. Even the smallest details like that came back to me. And that's when I got into the cryptid side of things, because at that point I typed in green man because that's all I had. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't really know about reptilians or anything at this point. I just typed in green man and I got all these different images coming through up on Google, and that's when I discovered that people were also seeing similar things, reporting similar things, and that blew me away completely.
I mean, that's an amazing story. And not the only one like that I've heard. What's interesting to me actually is a lot of people have sightings like that, but they don't have this extra level of perception you have, which is that you're an artist, very good artist, which I found out recently with the wonderful gift, the Bigfoot picture that you sent me. Thank you. But I mean, this really means that you have this extra layer of perception. So you notice all these tiny details. What's interesting to me with that is, so what can you tell us about that? The face, the face had black eyes, had a small head, but what were the contours of the face like? Did it have a pronounced separate nose? Was it scaly? Were the arms long and sinewy, or was it sort of thick and muscular? Was there any hair on the body? What kind of details did you see?
So the skin wasn't scaly. It was more like a leathery texture. It definitely wasn't a one-piece suit or anything like that. This was skin. This was flesh, but it looked like rhino skin, just olive green. The eyes wasn't cat eyes, with the slit down the middle or anything like that. They were just human. I would say they were a bit bigger than humans, but not massive wraparound eyes like you would expect with the alien grade. Hollywood's version of what.
But still that shape, that sort of
still that shape. Still the human
shape. Okay.
Still the human shape, just a little bit bigger than a human eye, but solid black. The head, in proportion to the rest of the body, was very, very small. I'd probably say a bit smaller than a human's head.
Okay.
But when you think about how tall and dangly this thing was, the head should have been a lot bigger. If I was to repaint that or draw that, I would say straight away that the proportions are completely out. The head is too small.
And what kind of height are we talking about? As an approximate estimate for a child who's 11 years old?
Yeah, about 6.5 feet, 6.5 feet, close to 7 feet tall. It was a tall.
And thin, skinny, or sort of
relatively
very thin.
Very, very, very thin. Not anorexic thin. It wasn't skin and bones.
But lean.
It was
lean. It's amazing. And was it? I mean, did you feel that? Obviously, you're looking at something otherworldly. Yes, but that's something you can feel when you're looking at perhaps a Bigfoot as well. Did you feel that you were looking at something not from this world, or just something you were unaware of? I mean, what are your thoughts on that now? That it was an extraterrestrial, it was something that's here, something completely unknown to you.
Yeah, I feel that, I think that this was an extraterrestrial. And I think that what's happened on that day is, I don't know if this creature does this once a week, once a year, or how many times it does this, but I know that on that day, it didn't expect a school bus full of kids to pull up. And, I think...
Be peeing at the side of the road suddenly, in the middle of nowhere.
That's right. Yeah, and I think had we have pulled up 10 meters down the road, or 5 minutes later or before, I would have completely missed that. That was just a chance encounter where this thing was caught off guard.
Wow, but that's amazing to me. Yeah, and our mutual friend Chris Turner made a great documentary on reptilian sightings, and I recently interviewed James Bartley as well about a similar subject, and he obviously he's an expert on that field. What's interesting to me is the possible crossovers. Did you feel, looking at the creature, say there had been a Bigfoot in the forest, you may have felt that you were looking at an animal, a sentient, intelligent animal, like an ape of some kind. But did you feel that you were looking at some sort of animal with this creature, or this was a being in the same way that you're a being? You're a human, and that's an equivalent of another species.
yeah, I definitely felt like there was some kind of intelligence there to this thing. I don't know where I get that from. I don't know why I'm saying that to you, because there was nothing significant that happened, that can make me say, right, this is why I think that. It was literally, like I said, it looked up at me, I looked at this thing. But if it was, if it was stooping over to keep a low profile, I think that is a sign of intelligence to some degree.
Absolutely. And you locked
Yeah,
eyes with it. Did you see some sort of expression of acknowledgement, or did you see the dismissive, blasé expression, or was it just that? I mean, you could even pick that up from a bear or a fox or anything without really seeing too much in the face. You can pick up on the body language, right? Was it more body language that was blasé, or something in its expression?
that's a great question, Andy. And I've never ever mentioned this before because it's never been put to me that way before. But you've just mentioned other animals, and we're all we're all familiar with the looks that a dog will give us, or a cat, or even a chimp. This thing looked at me in a way that I've never made eye contact with any other animal. And like I said, it was almost like it knew. It knew that I wouldn't run away. It knew that I wouldn't be scared enough to go tell
Yeah.
anybody. I don't know how it knew that, but I had this sense that it was just so in control of that situation. And I don't know why or how it knew, but it was just it was too calm. It was too calm.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe your body language as well. I always and we'll come on to this side of with your Bigfoot hunts as well. In the UK, when I've been out there, sometimes then there's been a few incidents where I've suddenly wondered if I'm just about to have an experience.
Yeah.
And in that very moment that happens, that I think, oh, I think something's coming, and I think this could be it, or this is it's a possibility, something's here. I suddenly realized that whatever I'm going to be face to face to is a real thing, probably an individual. And just like any other animal has the choice to make a split-second decision on how to deal with that incident, this thing will too. Only it might have the ability to pull my arms off. So, and that kind of reality of the situation is very unnerving, actually, because you start to question: do you really want to see? Isn't this something I would prefer to see in a scope from a quarter of a mile away than face to face in the woods? That intimidating one-on-one moment. So, has that been your experience out in the woods as well? Has you've had these poltergeist terrifying experiences? You've had this extraterrestrial encounter, seemingly.
Yeah.
Now you're out in the woods looking for Bigfoot phenomena in the UK. Have you had instances like that one, or at least felt that you are getting some sort of traction with whatever may be hiding out there?
It's like chasing shadows sometimes, and the hard thing is that I do know these things exist, and I do know that they're on this planet roaming around because I've experienced that myself. Had I not experienced that, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But I know 100% with myself that not everybody out there is lying or making up these stories. These things are out there, and I've never had an experience like when I was 10 or 11 years old with this creature in the woods. But it doesn't stop me from trying, because one day I might. Before that bus pulled up that day, I never knew that my life was going to change like that. And so I'm hoping that in the future, I can make more sense of what is going on. I have had experiences like what you just mentioned, similar, where you have the feeling that something is imminent, like the birds in the woods will, even the wind will stop, and it becomes deadly, deadly quiet. And I'll tell you a funny time when this happened. I was on the North Yorkshire moors, and I was walking through the woods. Bird song was loud. The wind was rustling through the leaves. Trees were swaying, and all of a sudden that stopped. And it stopped for a good minute. And I had this horrible feeling that something was going to happen. And I tell you, something did happen. An earthquake happened. The whole forest floor started to shake, and the sky above. I actually caught this on video. It's on my channel on one of the videos, and the sky above me was almost exploding off into the distance, and it was the most surreal experience I've ever had. And so I know that nature, like birds and other animals, that well in tune with what is about to come, or if there's anything inbound, because they knew well before I knew that the ground was about to start shaking. And then I've had that experience Other times, when there has been no earthquake, and you just think, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
What do these animals know? So it, like you said, very, very nerve-wracking when that does happen.
Yeah, I mean, I've had that once or twice where, you're passing, some sort of little moorland areas, or there's a whole bunch of noisy frogs there, then they just shut up. And it's not because of you, because they've been croaking their asses off before that, while you've been there, and suddenly, then they're just quiet. I'm like, oh, the frog shutting up is not a good sign. Because that means they think something big and bad is around. It's a funny thing. Like yourself, I've been out a lot looking for bits and pieces in the UK, and it's a troubling, I suppose, for many people, it's a troubling concept, the British Bigfoot, because we're an island, number one.
Yeah.
But my retort to that was, we had bears and wolves, and much further go mammoths and woolly rhinos and cave lions, and we're an island. Stuff got here. It wasn't always an island. It was joined at one point. So I don't think that's much of an argument, but it is relatively a small place, and that's an argument that's fed back to me a lot. I always use that UK National Ecosystem statistic of 6.8% of the entire landmass is urban sprawl, including the rural settlements and roads. But people still don't get it. Now, you go out there a lot. Let the audience know, if you agree, that is, what kind of sparsity and underpopulation is out there, in the wilds of Britain. What kind of interactions are you having with other people when you're out in the woods? Are you seeing people, or is it just you and emptiness?
Well, to put it into perspective, the North Yorkshire Moors is 554 square miles, wooded areas, valleys, lakes, rolling hills, and I spend a lot of my time up there. Sometimes weeks on end camping solo, and if I really, really wanted to, I could make myself invisible. I could never see a person ever again, and that's just on the North Yorkshire Moors. And when you go to places like Scotland, that becomes even easier because the area is bigger, it's much more remote. And I know that even on the North Yorkshire Moors, like I've said, where there's the cycle paths here and there's roads cutting through, and there's dog walkers, people hacking on horseback, I can stay completely hidden. And I have done this. I've done this for as long as I want to. It's not that difficult because people are out there looking for these things. Nobody's thinking there's a guy in the forest hiding from me right now. And so it makes my life very, very easy to stay hidden. If there is a creature out there, and that's its sole purpose on this planet, is to stay hidden, I have no doubt in my mind that it would be a very easy task.
I think so. And what about the witnesses? I've received, when I doubt it could be a reality, I come across another super compelling witness, somebody, no skin in the game really, that's just had this crazy experience they can't explain. Have you encountered many people like that with the British Bigfoot phenomena?
I have, yeah. There's been, for every one or two stories that you get waiting there, this guy's just, trying to get the attention, and there's always one story that makes you, like you said, sit back on the fence and think, wow, this really did affect this person. This person really did come away with some kind of trauma from what they've experienced. And there's people out there that I've spoken to that I have no question about. They seem as genuine as they come. There's no reason for them to lie, like you said. And the story, I always think if you're going to make a story, that most people, left to their own accord, will try and elaborate and make it fanciful. And it's the ones where the small details, when they mention the small details, and you think to yourself, they didn't need to tell me about that. Like, that doesn't add to the story. That doesn't make this story any more exciting, but yet they've told me it. It's those details that I think, right, okay, maybe there is something here now then.
Yeah, inconsequential details that you can't leave out of the story.
Yeah,
that make no difference to. Yeah, I think it's amazing. It's an amazing genre, and I think it's a growing community in the UK as well, and more people like yourself and others. And there's some great sort of new Bigfoot groups around as well, actually, that are really genuine and open and friendly.
Right.
jumping and stomping on people all over the place. There's some really, and I feel this throughout all of cryptozoology. There seems to be a growing movement of, largely in many cases, newer people in one sense or another that are just saying, let's work together, let's chat, let's keep it friendly, let's explore the options. And I just love that. I would like to get your opinion on the big cats, the British big cats, because of course you're out there a lot. Yorkshire Moors, I mean, there's a lot of big cat sightings there in that whole area. So what are your thoughts on that, and have you had any experiences?
I've never had an experience with the big cats. There's a lot of people I know that Christina really does speak highly of the big cats, and I have no reason to doubt it. There's a lot of footage out there, and a lot of people claiming to have seen. Even where I live now, close to the East Coast, there's places around here that people swear they've seen big cats. So, I have no reason to doubt it. I've just never experienced anything for myself. I've never seen a print that unquestionable. I've never heard any growls or birds or anything like that. So, yeah. No,
and what about the likelihood of those things being able to eke out a living on the Yorkshire Moors, prey items and places to hide? What do you think about that?
Yeah, very, very, very easy. I mean, for anyone that's never been to the UK or you've never took a stroll through the North Yorkshire Moors, like I said, it is possible to walk for hours on end and never see anybody. And everywhere you go, pretty much, within a few miles, there'll be cattle of some kind, whether it's cows or sheep, pheasants. There's even wild chickens just running around on the roads and stuff. So
there's
plenty of food in these areas for a wildcat to survive on.
Rabbits and what about deer population?
The deer population is massive. I mean, I can go out every November and October during rutting season on the North Yorkshire Moors, and I could take someone religiously to go see a family of deer that I see every year, red deer as well. So really big. There's also, like you said, rabbits and foxes, badgers, things like that.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I think it's that's something for me that's very intriguing. It's not really cryptozoology, I know, but it's from the out of place animal perspective, the tag on to cryptozoology and the unknown. It's an amazing thing for me to think that there could possibly be a population of sorts around the UK. Do seem to be that widespread, and of course, we can look at an origination point for that as well. That Dangerous Wild Animals Act in 1976, which might answer some of those questions as to how they got there, at least, and if they are out there and they're pretty conspicuous and they're eking out a living without being, I suppose, captured or at least acknowledged by DEFRA and the other people out there, then I think that gives more credibility to other species being hidden out there as well, from my perspective. So it's a bolster for me. Big cat phenomena is a bolster to the Bigfoot phenomena. What would be really nice, I guess, would be to talk about some of your thoughts on tracking. I know you spent some time in the army. You're quite a seasoned outdoorsman. What kind of things do you do? What techniques do you utilize when you're out there looking for Bigfoot?
Yeah, so for me personally, I try and cover all bases. So what I'll do is I'll take some sticky tape and I'll wrap that around a few branches that are above. I have to stand on my tiptoes pretty much to reach these branches, or just a bit lower than that. Only so I can rule out the small games, foxes, badger, etc. And that's hopefully, I do that in the hope to find some kind of hair samples. Anything but fast, it will stick to the tape.
Okay. Great.
Sorry, what was you say?
That's great. I like that.
Yeah. I'll do things like that. I have multiple game cameras that I'll set out just to see where the foot traffic of animals is headed, and that's why I know where this family of deers reside every October, November through the game cameras. And it's just nice, even if you're not picking up anything unexplained, to figure out what the movement of animals in that area is and what their patterns are. Also, as well, plaster of Paris, things like that, the prints. I'll always carry a pack of that in my bag. And beyond that, a lot of it is just down to your own basic instinct, knowing what the different sounds are in the woods, learning the environment when things are right, when things don't feel right, and becoming one with where you are in that environment. Because a lot of the time when people go out there, they don't know what a fox sounds like. They've never heard a female
Mm.
vixen. They've never heard two hedgehogs fighting, or you know, a nest of barn owls, all of which sound horrific if you don't know.
Yeah, I mean the woods. I mean the sounds of the woods at night are terrifying. If you're unfamiliar with what's out there, they certainly are terrifying. Foxes, especially. I mean, I'm just in the outskirts of London. It's like it's fox paradise here. If I go out in an evening walk, my neighborhood, I'll see 12, 13, 14 different foxes. And there's so many. One of the things I think is it's very important for people to get hold of in this genre, and it's something that's always been a big bugbear for me personally, is the sticks and stones. They call it, phenomena, sticks especially, and the formations. And you say, you used to do a lot of scouting when you were young as well, and of course, erecting little teepees when you're a scout and everything. That's part of it, isn't it? I did that as part of the whole thing. What do you think about this phenomena in the Bigfoot community? Is it damaging that this is almost like a feeder pill that gives people this feeling of success constantly, and yet it's not really proving anything other than you found sticks? So what's your personal opinion on that? And if you do find any funny formations, how do you check out the area to confirm what you're looking at?
Yeah, I don't. For me, the stick structures don't really hold any weight because I've seen the most weirdest formations form naturally in front of my eyes on blustery days. The way that trees can fall and stack up. You see everything like from crosses and like almost hashtag type formations. So I don't really think it holds any weight for me. I think that if there is a creature out there and it's living off the land and it's been this elusive for this long, it doesn't need the aid of sticks, navigation. Like you said, we live on an island. It's not a great big. This is not the Pacific Northwest. I can go out. You can drop me anywhere in the UK pretty much without a sat nav or any kind of homing beacon, and I guarantee to walk for a few hours. I'll find a road. I'll find some. So this thing, whatever it is, I don't think it needs the aid of sticks. I don't. I think it's perfectly attuned to its environment, and it knows exactly where to move at what times of year without the aid of sticks.
I have to agree with that. I mean, it's nice if you think about it. You go out into the woods and there's something there's no shortage of in the woods, sticks. And you find some sticks in a glyph-like shape, or it looks like an A, or whatever else. And sometimes, wild campers and scouts and other people go out and just mess around. We just mess around, or people even clearing forestry will often stack sticks, in little sort of tree clefts, to keep them there for later, or even for firewood or whatever's going on.
Well, the biggest thing for me is a lot of these younger plantations that they're man-made plantations and they're not fully rooted trees. They don't have the time that's required to become mature rooted trees, and so you'll find that after a few winters, these trees, these young trees, will blow in different directions, fall out, uproot themselves. They're just chaos, especially on the North Yorkshire moors. I see this all the time. There's actually full plantations that have been blown down, and every single one of those trees has created some kind of a formation if that's what you want it to do.
It's treacherous to walk through there sometimes. When we were in Galloway Forest Park a few years back, there was a lot of plantation there in certain sections, and you could even see like a whole hill full of pine normally, spruce, whatever it is, just all sort of dominoed on top of each other. And of course the ground there is probably the same in Yorkshire. It's sodden, it's so wet. There's like moss that's a foot high that you're walking through and stuff like that. And it's just, people don't think about it. It's a nice thought, but we obviously need a lot of prep around that. If anything that could erect a teepee in the middle of the Yorkshire moors also might be heavy enough to leave a good set of footprints and a few hairs about. And
the only time I would probably really start paying attention, raise half an eyebrow, is if someone could show me a tree upturned, stuck deep in the ground with the roots facing up. Things like that, I will entertain. I will look at that because that's not a normal thing to occur. Also, as well, if there's any kind of pattern, like reoccurring pattern, if you see that 5 trees have been snapped at the same height, and then you walk a few hundred meters, and another 5 trees at the same height have been snapped, and they're all pointing in the same direction, that is a reoccurring pattern that just wouldn't happen naturally. It's too coincidental. And if I see things like that, then maybe I would pay attention. But I've never seen things like that. I've never seen an upturned tree. And I know that there are stories out there, that's why I'm mentioning this. There are stories of this happening, but I've just never physically seen that with my own eyes.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree. I really would. Just quickly before we wrap up, tell people where they can find you, what projects you have out there available, and how they can get involved.
Yeah, so you can find me on YouTube, 401 Files. I'm also on Instagram under that same name, 401 Files. And I've just started an Instagram page called Digital Creations with Ben, which is where I'm going to be posting some of my artwork there as well.
Oh yeah. Well, I also I suggest to anybody, like, you know, and check out the artwork for sure. The 401 Files is also amazing. I love cryptid art, and Ben was very nice enough to gift me one of the pieces, which is now hanging on my wall, a private place. And yeah, it's fantastic. You've just got to get involved. Ben, okay, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, and I wish you a happy Christmas and a Merry New Year.
Brilliant, Andy. Thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Speak to you soon. Bye.